general public is often not engaged in public policy questions. Back when Light Squared was going on, what you read in the press was the GPS community has mobilized in reaction to Light Squared. And I thought that was unfortunate because Light Squared portrayed themselves as a disruptor who were being blocked by an unknown sort of special interest group. And sort of our message of the book was, there is no special interest GPS community today. We are all the GPS community today. If you had a separate system, you guys would still have to protect it too. Someone would have to protect it. Another point is that when we look at the internet and we think about the target reach and all of these different hacks, one thing that the public using a system that is run by the Air Force does is security can drive your development. The internet has run way ahead of security. We don't want that for GPS. The OCX delays, those are not your favorite headlines, but imagine headlines that said GPS had been hacked. Our final point was that with the public not weighing in, the people who are actively engaged in security strategy must account not just for a military asset, the loss of a military asset, but loss of vital public utility. So it's great to be finding ways around GPS to preserve warfighting, but the public is maybe not engaged in the same kind of thinking process that you guys are. Next slide, please. And so we just listed these points. For the future, it looks like there's going to be a robust multi-GNSS, multi-PNT environment. You just had Iridium announce that they've put a satellite timing system upgrade on an old satellite system. It's so new, I don't know whether they say it can be used if GPS is unavailable. I don't know if anybody has proven that yet or not. We see new launch capability coming on with people like SpaceX. I think it's safe to say federal budgets will remain constrained. There'll be continued calls to reduce costs and redundancy. And this is where the public not being engaged and not knowing why GPS is important to them really could hit you hard. We've had several conversations today about with people about manpower levels, sequestration, those kinds of things. You don't want to get into a situation where you don't have enough civilian recognition of what they may be casting aside or the difficult situation that you guys might be placed in through political decisions that are made. Increased focus on resilience. And then, of course, space as congested, contested, and competitive. That was said, I think, 5 years ago. Still true, maybe more true than ever. Next slide. So our conclusion is GPS is an indispensable military asset. It's a vital public utility. Civilians cannot afford to take GPS for granted, and the military should not underestimate public reliance. And we hope that any backups, complements, alternatives, and strategy will consider both sets of users. I think Richard has a couple more remarks.
Next slide, please. We were asked about future projects. I'd like to write a biography of Captain Philip Van Horn Weems. This is Captain Weems with Charles Lindbergh and Maura Lindbergh. He taught Charles Lindbergh celestial navigation after he flew to Paris. And he played a major role in advancing airplane navigation. His colleague, Harold Gaddy, taught Hap Arnold. So he was a major person. I didn't intend to write solely on navigation, but that seems to be what I'm falling into. Next slide, please. And we're open to questions.
We have a few minutes for questions. you can speak up, Mr. Sherman is kindly videotaping this, I'll give you a copy of that. If anybody out there has a question for the speakers, please stand, speak up, and give your name. Mike?
I'm Mike Pearson from the Public Affairs Office that's trying to tell the public how important GPS is. One of the things I do see though is from the Galileo folks, they're still harping on the military controls GPS. Do they have a different business model? I mean, what's in it for them to kind of beat up on the military controls GPS?
Some of that may go back again to selective availability, and that, you know, we turned it off in 2000 and guaranteed that we would not turn it on again. But suspicion there. Of course, Galileo, they started out saying they would charge for the basic service, and shows some stupid people can have a lot of money. You know, why would you? And now they're talking about, you know, for certain emergency uses. But the military is obviously controlled by the U.S. government. And I agree with Eric. The military control allows you to control the security. And I don't see how you can give that up. And you can respond, well, it may be controlled by the military, but the fact is, you know, similar to our figures of about $100 billion a year in increased economic benefit to the U.S. civilian economy, you people have gotten free ride since the 1980s, tens of billions of dollars. Why do you care that the Air Force controls GPS? You're getting a lot of free benefit out of it. So,
No, I don't know what to say other than that the GSA, their management system, will be an interesting experiment, a good model, and I'm glad that they're doing that over there, and we can watch what happens with their system and learn from it as opposed to trying that experiment ourselves.
I'll ask a question. So, with your first visit to Shreveport today, first visit inside the Second Space Operations Squad. So, what were your impressions and what was the thing that surprised you most as you walked in and saw it for real?
well, first off, we were extremely impressed. As a Navy brat, it's hard for me to admit that the Air Force can do things well, like do things very well. And we were talking about the average age of the people. You know, one of the women controllers was 20, and it reminded me of NASA during its glory days. You know, during Apollo 11, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are landing, they have an error message. You know, 1102, I forget what it was. But Stephen Bales, a 27-year-old, said go. We are go on that error. You know, so NASA in the 1960s had the right stuff. They were not a large bureaucratic organization, which unfortunately they seem to have become. And the fact that you can attract so many young, bright people means that bureaucracy has not overtaken the Air Force Space Command that's controlling GPS.
I think I was most impressed by the difference in what I saw and what I think the public imagines. When I have conversations with people about GPS and I start trying to explain to them that this incredible timing precision or navigational precision is made possible because mathematicians can cipher out numbers to 16 digits, and we have equipment that does that. When we see the racks of atomic clocks, it's so technical, so high-tech, that I'm afraid that the public almost thinks of it like cruise control, like it's on autopilot, that it's not much to run. And yet the public see this, they can realize that it is not in the least on autopilot. It is being basically driven every day. It is, it is hands-on 24/7. And I think the public needs, there's a lot of things the public needs to know. I suggested, sitting around the conference table there, that I would suggest to the Air Force to create something along the lines of the Intel Inside campaign. Remember, Intel was inside of IBM computers, but who knew it? And so they created that campaign. I know that in GPS World Magazine, Don Jewell finishes off his editorials and says, brought to you free of charge by the Air Force. You guys, don't wait until there's a story in the Wall Street Journal that a contractor is over budget. Don't wait for Light Square to come and accuse some companies that have been very entrepreneurial and made great equipment that has enabled all kinds of things to be put into effect. Don't wait for the public to hear bad stuff. Get out in front and tout it all the time. It may seem, well, nice. Sometimes writers are told, well, people notice the writing. You want to stand in the background. If it's good writing, nobody will ever think about the writing. And so it may feel good to say, well, if nobody knows what we're doing, we're doing it right. But I'm afraid that in really tight budget situations and the things that go on in civilian politics, you really want to have civilians there keeping your support. And so I think it's a good idea to put the good stuff out there as much as possible.
Well, and again, the benefits. What other government program is providing somewhere between the inception to date cost and maybe 2.5 times the inception to date cost in benefit every year? It would seem like if Congress had any brains, and I know the question answers itself, they would be protecting GPS's budget because, what my wife is a fraud examiner, and we talk about the normalcy bias. GPS for all the warning, GAO studies, GPS constellation may be cut, by X by year Y. Those predictions have not come true. So the normalcy bias that, well, we can keep on cutting the Air Force's budget and we'll continue getting that $100 billion annual benefit, or GPS will continue to be the gold standard. No, that requires investment. And, again, what Eric said, the very talented young people that we saw that are managing the system every day and are taking decisions that if something goes awry, get noticed big time. We want to keep on attracting those people and retain them if at all possible.
You don't want members of Congress to get the impression that GPS runs itself on autopilot, so it doesn't matter how many people you have, because people may be able to work 12 hours instead of 8 hours, but nobody can work 24 hours. And you've got the numbers on your side. You've got the economic numbers are so compelling. You can tell that story.
Other questions? Right there?
Yeah, have you tried to calculate the other side of that equation, civil and military, the original military purpose and savings in fuel and efficient navigation and the ordnance saved to hit the right target with 1 bomb instead of World War II with 12? Not to mention the lives saved by precision ordnance, both intended targets and collateral damage.
I've not seen studies like that. That sounds like a great study. I would think that the military would do those studies, but I haven't certainly seen a private study of it.
Well, and of course, also what Eric was talking about this morning, the precision-guided munitions save a lot of civilian lives, and the world, to the extent that world opinion means something, expects the U.S. to do better. Of course, the other side for the war fighting is GPS has consequences. Our potential adversaries certainly studied what happened in the first Gulf War, and now China has thousands of miles of tunnels. What's in those tunnels? Another point of caution for the U.S. military is it's not always going to be the first Gulf War. The potential adversaries are looking at ways of making your precision-guided munitions less valuable. They said during the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese wanted to get close enough to the American troops that our advantage in air power, grab their belts, would be offset. And by the same token, guerrilla tactics, the potential enemies of America are studying how effective GPS is, and they're looking for ways to make it less advantageous to us.
Think ahead a few years to when self-driving cars begin to become commonplace. And there are a few people, not enough people, thinking, how will the public react to GPS enabling that if people start to make self-driving cars become self-driving bombs? It's been done in the Middle East. I don't know of a case where a self-driving car was used to self-drive a bomb into a location in this country, but some very smart people that I have read are concerned about that. And I fear that if something like that happens, if you don't have that reservoir of support for GPS, that you can have people running around with their hair on fire saying, well, we gotta make this unavailable. And it's not really feasible to do selective availability. I think that forces out of harm. So my civilian take on it is that the wider knowledge of public reliance on GPS, the more goodwill you build up, the better off you are when some problem occurs, like budgets, terrorism, whatever it is.
Richard, I've been meaning to ask you to talk about your father. As all you know, Roger Easton was one of the fathers of GPS. And Richard addressed that in the book of Who is the Father of GPS? And as usual, success breeds many fathers. But in your book, you mentioned the Vanguard system. And you talked about your father bringing home the melon. But you didn't talk about the airplane ride. Would you tell that story?
About
taking it in a cardboard box.
Well, I think I touched on it, but probably maybe not enough. TV3 blows up. Embarrassment on national TV. I think Martin's stock dropped. The Russian Soviets at a certain point offered to give the U.S. foreign aid as an underdeveloped country. So not the greatest day. One comment Dad made was that they got 3 good rockets from Martin, and they had 3 successful Vanguards. But TV3 blows up. After it cools down, as you saw, the satellite survived. You can see it at the Air and Space Museum. It's right next to the rocket pit, and it's just, at least when I saw it, I know they've done a remodeling, so they moved a lot of things around, but when I last saw it, they had the Sputnik key that was used to launch Sputnik was 5 feet from the TV3. So it blows up, cools down. Marty Voltov says, what do we do? And Dad says, well, I guess we bring it back. So, it had a little wooden box. He had a duplicate of it that I've seen the box. and bought a seat for it on the plane and took it on the plane back. And it sat in my house overnight, and then it migrated to John Hagen, who was an astronomer and the head of Project Vanguard. And for a long while, it ticked a lot of Vanguard people off. They had it with an Uncle Sam holding Vanguard that exploded and saying, Uncle Sam is looking at a space program. So it's now much more properly featured. And in fact, I've got, my brother took a number of pictures of it. You know, that's just one at the Air and Space that if anyone's interested, I can give the link. But that's one disadvantage of being a young brat. I was 2 years old, so I don't remember any of it.
Thanks, Richard. You can imagine trying to bring on a satellite on a plane today.
Yeah.
On the other hand, his picture was in the December '57 National Geographic, which the main article was before Sputnik, and then there's a little postscript. He's holding the Vanguard 1, and when I was in second grade show and tell, I brought that. So.
We'll end on that note. Joe Hyden, come forward and make a presentation.
So before I make the presentation, you asked us to tell you some stories. So I'll tell one story that's important for everybody in the audience, and I think you'll find it interesting too. So you mentioned Don Jewell in his article from GPS brought to you from the United States Air Force. So when and why did he start doing that? Started doing that because we've been on a kick in this command for the last 4 years of telling the story. We've been working with the public affairs, working in a number of places. You saw the 60 Minutes show. All those are part of the story. But one of the first things that I just happened to be the guy that was selected to do it is when I was the vice commander, I was told to go brief the Institute of Navigation at their national conference in Orlando. So I stood up and I was briefing them and I was telling the story. And if you're at the Institute of Navigation, you're talking GPS, you're a rock star. So I mean, it's a pretty friendly audience. So, but I got to the end and I became very critical of that audience because that audience has the navigation community as a whole. And I told them, you're not telling the story of GPS well in the United States. And we're working like crazy to tell the story, but it's self-serving when the Air Force tells the story. You need to be telling the story better as well. And I said, if you went out of this room and you went into the streets of Orlando, Florida, and you asked 100 people where GPS comes from, I bet you less than 2 would know it came from the United States Air Force. And Don Jewell was in the audience, and he challenged me on that. He said, that's bogus. People understand where GPS comes from. They're not thankful for it, but they understand where it's come from. And I said, you're wrong. Go ask people. And so he went out that day into that hotel in Orlando, and he walked next door where there was the National Convention of the American Medical Association. Doctors. All right, he said, I'm going to ask 100 people. The first 100 people I come to, I'm going to ask them where GPS comes from. Now, these are educated people. He asked 100 people at the AMA convention where GPS comes from. How many got it right? 0. Not a one. That's why we have to tell a story, and that's why we very appreciate you writing the book, helping tell the story, because it's an important story for us to tell the world. And we have a couple presentations to give you. So, Mr. Easton, on behalf of Air Force Base Command, and thanks to you and to your father for what you've done for GPS in the world and telling our story.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Eric Frazier, thank you for partnering with me. Thank you for telling the story. And we'll send this for happiness. Thank you.
Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
All right, y'all can take off. I'm going to hang around a while.